Jeff, this is one of the more interesting markets from my point of view. I don't know what is compelling people to bet on Joe Biden resigning. We're seeing a split race here. This is obviously the most important state in the union right now. Or what's the play here right now? Is it betting on the Pennsylvania election winner, or is it more about betting on the electoral outcomes where it doesn't matter who wins, it's going to be close either way?
All you timeless children with your predictions and flashbacks, trying to get ahead. What makes you think I can see you? What makes you think I believe you? Dreams inside my bed. Have you heard this lately? News stepping up lately. Shot from the past. All the dreams were flying, all the thoughts were dying. Heard something fast.
This is the Prediction Trade. I'm your host, Chris Vecchio, joined by my co-host, Jeff Joseph. We're here for the next 30 minutes as we walk through everything and anything that you can bet on in the world of, well, betting, Jeff. Last week, we had a great guest, Robert Cahaley from the Trafalgar Group. Want to thank our audience for making it the most watched episode of the Prediction Trade ever. Jeff, we can walk through this momentous day for betting markets before we get to the actual politics of it all. CFTC and a judge has a ruling for Kalshi.
Yeah, that was a big moment. We've been following this for a while and talking about it on prior episodes. This is something that a number of platforms have been working on for a long time, pushing back at the CFTC. Obviously, Predictive, which has been around for a long time, is existing under exemptive relief offered through the CFTC that allows them to make markets on election outcomes. And then Kalshi entered the scene. Kalshi is an online platform that has prediction markets, but was excluded from doing political or election outcome markets. So they do things like TSA counts and temperatures and weather-related music drops, record sales, and just doing prediction markets on non-political events. But they've been pushing for a long time, particularly with the general election upon us, to have these markets. And it's been a tug of war. We've been following it in Luckbox magazine and our weekly newsletter as well. And a couple of days ago, we had a really good outcome for those of you who like free markets and the ability to be able to hedge your risk or to speculate on a variety of different things other than the securities markets. That's a big win. And you're going to see a lot more prediction markets coming from this point forward. It literally took Kalshi, Kalshi, less than an hour to have their prediction markets up on the House and Senate races immediately following the district court appellate ruling that allowed them to enter those markets. So you're going to be seeing more of these markets show up, and that's what we do. As you said at the onset, we talk about if you can bet on it, you can bet we're going to talk about it on the Prediction Trade. We've been doing that here for 4 years now. So it was a big moment, and Kalshi now has a House and Senate market. They have the Republicans leading in who's going to win the Senate. They have the Democrats leading in who's going to win the House market. They're putting up a Trump v. Harris market right now, and I'd expect to see that coming online very soon. It's also probably not a bad idea to look at some of the other markets. I noticed something today that would be a surprise. If you go over, Chris, pull up the poly market for the general election for Trump v. Harris, you're going to see something we haven't seen in a number of days. And that is a dead heat, or at least that was the case a couple hours ago. Obviously, these are moving markets, but there you go. I just saw this for the first time. Harris had been up by 1 or 2 cents for the past several weeks. Obviously, I'm predicted she has a wider margin. She's up over Trump by about 6 or 7 cents. But this is the first time poly market, by far the most liquid of all the prediction markets. It's estimated that over $1 billion has been wagered just in this market. Trump v. Harris. Of course, that's a blockchain-enabled market, and U.S. citizens are precluded from betting directly on this market, but many are bypassing it using different vehicles. And it's become because of its liquidity, it's become the kind of standard of prediction markets for benchmarking purposes. And today I noticed we pulled up to a dead heat for the first time.
We have pulled into a dead heat. When we take a look at the betting markets, there's actually quite the divergence from what we're seeing elsewhere in the national polls. We've also seen a divergence from even Nate Silver's odds in recent sessions. But let's talk about where Silver stands with things. 49.4% for Harris, 46% for Trump. Over the past week, this is a race that's been shifting for the poll aggregates by 0.6 points in favor of Dems. Net over the past month, it is an even race. But Jeff, there is one state that matters more than most. We've heard this from previous guests on the prediction trade. If it was Rachel Bitecofer or Robert Cahaly, that state is Pennsylvania. And right now, Polymarket has Pennsylvania listed to basically 52-48. In terms of Republican versus Democrat. In this case, obviously, that would be Trump versus Harris here. But that is a split from where the polls stand. According to Nate Silver's model, Pennsylvania is polling 48.8% in favor of Harris to 47.5% for Trump. That is a change of 0.2% in favor of Trump over the past week, although it is a shift of 0.1% in favor of Harris over the past month. So, Jeff, we're seeing a split race here. This is obviously the most important state in the union right now, or Commonwealth in the union right now. I wouldn't want to offend my friendly Pennsylvania neighbors. Jeff, what's the play here right now? Is it betting on the Pennsylvania election winner, or is it more about betting on the electoral outcomes where it doesn't matter who wins, it's going to be close either way?
Well, I think Cahaly gave us a whole new perspective last week, and that show is still available to watch on YouTube over on the tastylive trending channel on YouTube. You can pull up the Robert Cahaly interview that we did last week. When we asked him the question, is Pennsylvania really the keystone state? Is it going to be the ultimate arbiter of this election? Do you have to win Pennsylvania to win? He added some nuance that we hadn't spoken to before, and that is his response was specifically Harris cannot win without Pennsylvania, and that Trump cannot win without North Carolina. It was kind of an interesting take on things, and it resulted in several hundred comments on that show on the YouTube channel as a result of it, because it did give a new perspective to the race. So I think there's a lot to be said to that. The Pennsylvania polling is so tight, there's really no wager to be had here. It's one of the reasons we were really interested in speaking with Alan Lichtman, and of course we're going to reschedule him. We interviewed him in Luckbox magazine about 4 years ago, and that's how we reached out to him this time around to get him on. And what's so interesting, because there's a debate going on, and let's talk about that.
Yes.
Nate Silver and Alan Lichtman have been going at it back and forth in a very public feud on Twitter. Lichtman, of course, I've spoken to him before. We've had him in our publication in the past. He has a track record to be extraordinarily proud of. As you said, there's only one election that he didn't call the outcome, and that's because of Supreme Court intervention. So it's almost a perfect record. And he also back-tested his model going all the way back to the 1800s. And he and Silver are feuding. So Lichtman has 13 keys, and maybe we can even, at least show those or talk about those. He has 13 keys that the way it works is basically if you're the incumbent party and 5 or less of those keys go against you, you're going to win. That's how his models worked. And Silver said, and you're bringing it up here, right here. And here's his keys: party mandate, contents, incumbency, third party, and they're all very well described. And that's what we were going to ask the professor to do, was to go through each one of these keys, and we'll have him do it next week, perhaps.
And we're not going to show the entire, we're not going full open kimono here, Jeff. We're going to save this for when he's actually on.
Of course, right. And we're going to have him go through each one of these and tell us where he lands and how he got there as well. But Nate Silver, on the other hand, is saying, you're using some discretionary judgment. I'm in the business of being quantitative. You're a little bit more qualitative. A moment ago, before we started this segment, I was doing some searching around and saw that Newsweek just did a story today that said, who's more reliable, Alan Lichtman and his 13 keys or Nate Silver? Let's ask ChatGPT, which is a whole other thing. But they came to the conclusion that perhaps Silver, because it's based on quantitative aspects, is more reliable. I think it's a ridiculous debate. To Alan Lichtman's credit, he reached out a couple days and kind of set an olive branch out there saying, what are we feuding about? We look at the world differently. And I think there's a point there. And you, as an active options trader, me as an active prediction market trader, I think we can agree on one thing. And that is the use of Lichtman's 13 keys, which is a really qualitative assessment in some cases. Sometimes it's a binary determination, like whether or not the party's incumbent or not. But other times it's a little qualitative. Is there major geopolitical conflict going on? And sometimes he has to make a qualitative discretionary judgment there. But to me, the difference between polling and the 13 keys of Lichtman is very similar to the difference between fundamental analysis and technical analysis. And I know that there's videos all over YouTube where people are arguing which is better, but experienced traders are ultimately going to rely on a combination of both or have their preferences. So as an active prediction market trader, I think Lichtman's manner to capture sentiment and the mood of the voter, and you can't ignore the accuracy it's had over the last 50, 60 years, is something that cannot be discarded. At the same time, I think his model is vulnerable because it doesn't take into, if presidential outcomes were determined by the popular vote, I'd be all in on Lichtman's model. But because of the Electoral College, there's some nuance here that I don't think, if this vote comes down to Erie County, Pennsylvania, Lichtman's 13 keys aren't going to mean as much as the polling in that county. And quite frankly, it may come down to Erie County or Buck County, Pennsylvania. Those are two counties that are swing counties, and this entire election might come down to those two. And it's hard to say how 13 keys are going to be that important in capturing that sentiment. Nevertheless, I'm a fan of his work. And when you're a prediction market trader, just like when you're an equities trader, you look at a lot of different information, and I see it as being exceptionally helpful. What do you think about that comparison?
I think it makes a great deal of sense. I mean, Nate Silver's a numbers guy. He's when you're a quantitative person, you're just acting mechanically within the confines of your system. Obviously, human bias can go into the actual underlying algorithm of what the system puts out. But at the end of the day, you're not really there to color commentate. You're just there to call a spade a spade. So if you plug in numbers and the black box spits out XYZ, you then just run with XYZ. That's how you avoid actually making the mistakes that are tethered to your human biases. You export that analysis elsewhere. That's one of the reasons why I was so interested in this conversation with Dr. Lichtman today, because it feels like some of the keys maybe could be turned the other way. And does that mean that Harris has reduced odds of winning? I don't know, but either way, she may only have 8 of the 13 keys. It's not a blowout, and that means it's probably going to be a close race either way. Now, this to me is the bet, right? The bet here, the trade here is it's going to be a close race. The GOP is going to win by 215 electoral votes. The Democrats are going to win by 215 electoral votes. Really, there are people who think there's a 6% chance of a 215 point. Well, let's go through this realistically. If we have a race, the probabilities as it stands right now, if we were to look to the betting market, one of the great things that Polymarket does is give you implied odds for overall outcomes. You're talking about within 20 points if these ranges were to hold. It could mean that Harris, if she wins Pennsylvania, you're going to see her win perhaps by 16 electoral votes. If Trump wins Pennsylvania and holds on to North Carolina, he could win by somewhere between 8 and 20 electoral votes, depending upon how Arizona and Nevada shake out. But the point is that these big tail type of outcomes where one party has an 80, 90, 100 electoral vote victory, that just seems highly unlikely right now. So when I think about the margins of victory right now in some of the races, where did that just go? And that's why, we're doing this live, Jeff. We make the sausage here on air. I see the belly right now. The GOP by 15 to 34 out to the Dems 15 by 34, 11, 16, 19, 23, 30% chance for a tight race. Right. This seems like this is undervalued right now. This may be the value play, betting that it's going to be a tight race and you're not going to see one party win by margins that either Biden beat Trump in 2020 or that Obama beat Romney or McCain beat in either 2008 or 2012.
Well, as you may recall, last week we looked at, and you can pull up this same market on Predictive. Let's take a look at the Electoral College market at predictive.org. And it sets the similar tranches on the electoral account in the same manner that Polymarket does. And you might remember last week, I told you that I had placed that wager, that barbell approach, basically, where I took the 15 to 34 tranche GOP win, and I think I paid 8 cents for that. And then I took the 15 to 34 GOP win, which at that point I paid 12 cents for that. Both of the, so 20 cents invested for a $1 payout. So that's still a 5-to-1 payout if either of those two options prevail. And it is a barbell because basically you're saying I'm giving up the middle, a tighter race. I'm giving up the extremities. But if Pennsylvania with its 19 votes or North Carolina with its 16 electoral votes become the swing, that's likely the tranche they'll end up in. So I think that those looking for higher odds and higher payouts, it's not going to be in the 50-50 Trump v. Harris straight up vote. It's going to be identifying a group of these tranches, ideally 2 or 3, invested, like you said, up to 30 cents, get a 3-to-1 payout on the outcome. And that's right now the best deal on the table. There's another deal on the table that I'd like to put in front of our listeners. If you pull up predictive.org, if you can, let's take a look at one of the markets that's the Biden resign market. So I maxed out on the 88-cent no. I don't know why everybody else does. This is as close as I can see to an extremely high probability outcome. At this point, well, it's hard to say what Biden's thinking about at this point because we don't see a lot of them, but he's certainly thinking of his legacy, as he should be, and resigning with only a couple months left in his term just doesn't appear to be in the cards. So at 88 cents, you can buy a no that he's not going to resign. I guess it's up to 89 cents now. That's a 10% return over the next 2 months. Seems like a layup to me. So that's one of the trades I'd like to put in front of our watchers while it's still available. I imagine that thing's going to find itself at 96, 97 in no time and start squeezing out the remaining margin on that trade. But that's as close to a gimme as I've seen in a while.
Jeff, this is one of the more interesting markets from my point of view. I don't know what is compelling people to bet on Joe Biden resigning. There's been no indication that he's going to resign. Right. It wouldn't help Kamala at this point in time. Now, Granted, this is during his first term, and so technically that continues on to January. But if Kamala were to win, would he resign to make her the first female president of the United States prior to her own inauguration? I suppose there's a shot at that, because she's going to be president anyway, and she's already vice president.
I think that would almost
Trump wins,
that'd be taking the victory away from her, in essence, though.
Right. It seems very, very unlikely. Mm-hmm. And then if Trump wins, is he going to step down? No. I think, quite frankly, there's a conversation to be had about Biden potentially sticking around to maybe pardon some people, including his own son, Hunter. I mean, he is a father at the end of the day, and that needs to be on the table as consideration here. There are some of these discrepancies or inconsistencies, perhaps, in other markets right now. Will Harris be the 47th president of the United States? You know, there's an embedded bet here that Biden's resigning because technically she could lose the election and then also become the 47th president, which, you know, there's part of me that it would be kind of funny insofar as Trump's had a lot of 47th president of the United States merchandise printed already. And so having to rebrand his POTUS 48 in such short time would be ironic. And you could hear the litany of complaints already coming, how they cheated him out of being the 47th president.